The day my family called my online business "playing on the computer" was the same day their construction company started bleeding money. They just didn't know it yet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Chen, and I'm about to tell you how the daughter they wrote off as a dreamer became the only person who could save their empire from complete collapse. It started on a Tuesday morning in March, sitting at my laptop in the cramped bedroom I shared with my younger sister Emma in our family's house in Toledo, Ohio. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every conversation happening downstairs. And that morning, I heard my name being thrown around like a curse word. My father's voice boomed through the floorboards, sharp with frustration. "Maya's been upstairs for 3 years now, clicking away at that computer, and what does she have to show for it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing." My mother chimed in with that particular brand of disappointment she'd perfected over the years. "She's 26 years old, David. 26. Her cousin Jessica just bought a house. A real house, with a real job at the bank. What does Maya have? A laptop and excuses." I pressed my fingers against my temples and stared at the screen in front of me. 3 Shopify stores generating consistent revenue, a growing YouTube channel with 15,000 subscribers, and a digital marketing consultation business that had landed me clients in 4 different states. But to them, it wasn't real, because they couldn't see me leaving the house in a suit every morning. The Chen family had built their identity around concrete things. Literal concrete, actually. My father started Chen Construction when he was 23, fresh off a construction management degree, with nothing but a used pickup truck and enough determination to move mountains. By the time I was born, he'd built it into one of the most respected commercial construction companies in Northwest Ohio. They built shopping centers, office complexes, and apartment buildings. Things you could drive by and point to and say, "We built that." My sister Emma followed the family blueprint perfectly. Straight A's in high school, business degree from Ohio State, and now she was the company's project coordinator at 24, handling client relations and job scheduling. She wore pressed blazers, carried leather portfolios, and could talk to contractors and city planners with the same confident authority my father had perfected decades earlier. And then there was me, the family puzzle piece that never quite fit. I'd tried the traditional route first. 2 years of business school, following Emma's path, sitting in lecture halls learning about profit margins and quarterly reports. But something about it felt hollow, like wearing clothes that belonged to someone else. I was more interested in the marketing classes, the consumer psychology seminars, the way people made decisions about what to buy and why. While my classmates focused on balance sheets, I was fascinated by the stories brands told and how those stories connected with real people. When I dropped out junior year to pursue online marketing, the family dinner table became a war zone. My father saw it as throwing away my future. My mother saw it as embarrassing the family name. Emma saw it as her little sister choosing the easy path instead of the hard work of building something real. What they didn't see were the 18-hour days I spent learning everything I could about digital marketing, SEO, social media strategy, and e-commerce. What they didn't know was that I'd been quietly building my own empire while they assumed I was wasting time. My first breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Mrs. Rodriguez, who owned a small bakery downtown, had been struggling to compete with the chain stores that had moved into the area. She mentioned it to my mother during their weekly grocery store conversations, and my mother, probably trying to find some use for her wayward daughter, suggested she talk to me. I spent 3 weeks overhauling Mrs. Rodriguez's entire digital presence. New website, Instagram strategy, Facebook advertising, and a customer loyalty program built around email marketing. Within 2 months, her weekend sales had doubled. She was getting orders from 3 neighboring towns, and she had to hire 2 additional bakers to keep up with demand. Word spread quickly in our tight-knit community. The insurance agency down the street wanted help with their online reviews. The florist needed a better website. The accounting firm wanted to understand social media marketing. One by one, local businesses started reaching out, and one by one, I helped them transform their digital presence. But every success felt invisible to my family. When Mrs. Rodriguez sent me a thank you card with a bonus check because her October sales had tripled compared to the previous year, my father glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey, but when are you going to get a real job?" When my YouTube channel hit 10,000 subscribers and I started earning consistent ad revenue, my mother asked when I was going to stop playing around and start contributing to the household. When I landed a contract with a regional restaurant chain to manage their social media presence across 12 locations, Emma rolled her eyes and said I was just getting lucky with small-time clients. The breaking point came during our family's monthly dinner at Romano's, the Italian place where we'd celebrated every birthday and achievement for as long as I could remember. We were crammed into the corner booth, the same one we'd claimed since I was 10 years old. And the conversation had inevitably turned to the future. "Emma's been looking at properties," my mother announced, beaming with pride. She found a beautiful colonial in Sylvania, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a gorgeous kitchen. She should be able to close by summer. My father nodded approvingly. That's what happens when you make smart choices. Build equity instead of throwing money away on rent. Emma blushed slightly but couldn't hide her satisfaction. The mortgage isn't too bad, and with my promotion coming up, I'll be able to handle it comfortably. The unspoken comparison hung in the air like smoke. Emma was buying a house. Maya was still living in her childhood bedroom, working on a computer. "What about you, Maya?" my father asked, and I could hear the challenge in his voice. "Any plans to move forward with your life? Or are you content to stay in your room forever?" I set down my fork and looked around the table, 3 faces staring at me with varying degrees of expectation and disappointment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Actually, I've been thinking about getting my own place too. Business has been really good lately. My mother's expression shifted to concern. "Sweetheart, you can't base life decisions on hobby income. What happens when people stop needing websites or whatever it is you do up there?" "It's not hobby income, Mom. Last month I made more than Emma's salary." The silence that followed felt dangerous. Emma's face flushed red, and my father's jaw tightened in that way that meant I'd crossed a line. "That's impossible," Emma said quietly. "You don't even have a real job." "I have multiple real jobs. I have 3 different revenue streams, consistent clients, and I'm booked through the end of the year." My father leaned forward, his voice dropping to that low register that used to terrify me as a child. "Maya, I don't know what kind of numbers you're looking at, but let me explain something to you about real business. Real business means employees, overhead, insurance, regulations, licenses, contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Real business means building something that lasts, not playing around on social media." "David," my mother said softly, trying to diffuse the tension, but he wasn't finished. "Your sister manages projects worth more money than you've probably seen in your entire life. She coordinates teams of real professionals, deals with real deadlines, solves real problems. What you're doing upstairs, that's not business. That's a hobby that might make you a little pocket money until the next trend comes along." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break completely, but develop a hairline fracture that would eventually split everything wide open. "I'm helping real businesses make real money." Mrs. Rodriguez tripled her revenue. The Hendersons' flower shop is finally profitable after being in the red for 2 years. I'm solving real problems for real people. Emma shook her head, and when she spoke, her voice carried all the frustration of someone who'd been listening to this argument for years. "Maya, you're helping small mom-and-pop shops get a few more customers. That's nice, but it's not the same thing as what Dad and I do. We build things that matter. We create jobs for hundreds of people. We contribute to the economy in a meaningful way. What I do matters too. No, my father said, and the finality in his voice hit like a physical blow. What you do is convenient. It's easy. You sit in your room in your pajamas and make pretty pictures for Instagram. That's not work, Maya. That's not building something real. The restaurant suddenly felt too small, too hot, too loud. The family at the next table was celebrating someone's graduation, laughing and taking pictures, and I wanted to disappear into their joy instead of sitting in the wreckage of my own family's expectations. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, trying to compose myself. The girl looking back at me looked tired. Tired of defending herself. Tired of feeling like she had to prove her worth. Tired of being treated like the family disappointment when she was actually succeeding beyond anything she'd imagined 3 years earlier. When I returned to the table, the conversation had shifted to Emma's upcoming promotion and the new responsibilities she'd be taking on. Nobody asked about my plans again, and I didn't volunteer any information. We finished dinner in relative, quiet, paid the check, and drove home in separate cars. That night, I sat in my room with my laptop open, staring at the numbers that told a story my family refused to hear. Between my 3 Shopify stores, my consultation clients, and my YouTube ad revenue, I was consistently earning more per month than most people my age with traditional jobs. I had money in savings, 0 debt, and a waiting list of potential clients. But none of that mattered because I couldn't point to a building and say, I built that. I couldn't wear a suit to an office or carry business cards with an impressive company name. My success was digital, distributed, invisible to anyone who didn't understand how the modern economy actually worked. I pulled up my email and started typing a message to Amanda, my best friend from high school who'd moved to Denver after college. I think I need to get out of here, I wrote. I'm tired of being treated like a failure for succeeding differently. Her response came within minutes. Girl, you've been talking about this for months. What's stopping you? What was stopping me? Fear, probably. Comfort, definitely. The safety net of family, even when that family made me feel like I was falling through it every day. The familiar? Bedroom. The familiar routines, the familiar disappointment that had become as much a part of my identity as my own name. I closed the laptop and lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling that had witnessed every major moment of my life since I was 7 years old. The crack in the corner plaster that looked like a lightning bolt. The glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck, up there in middle school. The nail holes from all the different posters and pictures I'd hung over the years. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start looking for my own place. Not to prove anything to my family, but to prove something to myself. That I could build a life as real and valuable as anything constructed with concrete and steel, even if it was built with pixels and algorithms instead. But first, I had work to do. Mrs. Patterson from the vintage clothing boutique had scheduled a consultation call for tomorrow morning, and the restaurant chain wanted to review their Q2 social media analytics. Real work, for real businesses, generating real results, even if my family couldn't see it yet. The apartment I found was a tiny, 1-bedroom above a coffee shop in downtown Toledo, with creaky hardwood floors and windows that rattled when trucks passed by. It wasn't much to look at, but it was mine. For the first time in 26 years, I had a space that belonged entirely to me, where my success wasn't measured against anyone else's expectations. Moving out happened faster than I'd anticipated. 2 weeks after that dinner at Romano's, I was loading my car with boxes while my family watched from the front porch with expressions ranging from confusion to barely concealed disappointment. My mother kept asking if I was sure I could afford rent, utilities, and groceries on my computer income. My father muttered something about young people not understanding the value of family. Emma just shook her head like I was making the biggest mistake of my life. You know you can always come back, my mother said as I loaded the last box into my Honda Civic. when this phase passes. Phase. As if building a business was something I'd grow out of like a childhood obsession. With horses or boy bands. I hugged them goodbye and drove to my new place with a mixture of terror and exhilaration churning in my stomach. The first night, I sat on my single piece of furniture, a folding chair I'd borrowed from the coffee shop downstairs, eating takeout Chinese food and wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The apartment felt enormous and claustrophobic at the same time, filled with possibility and doubt in equal measure. But within a week, something shifted. Without the constant undercurrent of family disapproval, my productivity exploded. I set up my office in the bedroom's bay window, where morning light streamed across my monitors. I established routines that worked for me instead of trying to fit my schedule around family dinners and expectations. I woke up at 5:30, spent 2 hours on client work before the coffee shop opened, then took meetings throughout the day. My YouTube channel began to take off in ways I hadn't expected. The content I was creating, tutorials about digital marketing for small businesses, was resonating with entrepreneurs across the Midwest who were facing the same challenges as my Toledo clients. Comments poured in from restaurant owners in Michigan, boutique owners in Indiana, and service providers in Kentucky who were implementing my strategies and seeing real results. 3 months after moving out, I hit my first 5-figure month. Not revenue, profit, $23,000 in 30 days from a combination of consultation fees, YouTube ad revenue, affiliate marketing, and my e-commerce stores. I stared at the number on my banking app for 10 minutes, refreshing it repeatedly to make sure it wasn't a mistake. I wanted to call someone, to share the milestone with people who would understand its significance. But the people who would celebrate with me were scattered across the country. Clients and online friends who existed primarily in my digital world. The people who lived 20 minutes away, the ones who shared my DNA and my childhood memories, were the same ones who would find some way to diminish the achievement. Instead, I celebrated alone. I bought myself a decent mattress to replace the air mattress I'd been sleeping on and splurged on a coffee maker that didn't require me to go downstairs every morning. Small luxuries that felt enormous after years of saving every penny while living at home. The success kept building. By month 6, I was consistently earning more than Emma's salary at Chen Construction. By month 9, I was earning more than both Emma and my mother combined, since Mom worked part-time at the real estate office. The irony wasn't lost on me that the daughter they'd written off as financially irresponsible was out earning the family members they considered successful. But the real test came during the holidays. Thanksgiving dinner at my childhood home, the first time I'd been back since moving out. The house looked exactly the same, but I felt like I was visiting a museum of my former life. Everything seemed smaller somehow, more cramped, as if my perspective had literally expanded along with my bank account. "So how's the apartment working out?" my father asked as we sat around the dining room table, the same mahogany table where I'd done homework and eaten thousands of meals. "Really well. I love having my own space." "And you're managing to pay all your bills?" My mother's concern was genuine but tinged with skepticism, as if she expected me to admit I'd been surviving on ramen noodles and credit cards. "More than managing. Business has been incredible lately." Emma looked up from her sweet potatoes with mild interest. "Oh yeah? What kind of numbers are we talking about?" The question hung in the air, loaded with challenge and curiosity. Part of me wanted to keep my success private, to avoid the inevitable skepticism or attempts to minimize my achievements. But another part of me, the part that had been swallowing pride and defending my choices for years, wanted them to finally understand. Last month was my best yet, just over $31,000 in profit. The silence that followed felt different from the one at Romano's. This wasn't disbelief, it was shock. My father set down his fork and stared at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. $31,000? My mother repeated slowly. In 1 month? In 1 month. Emma's face had gone pale. Maya, that's more than I make in 3 months. I know. My father cleared his throat, and I could see him trying to process this information. What exactly are you doing to generate that kind of income? For the first time in years, he was asking about my work with genuine interest instead of condescension. I explained my business model, the different revenue streams, the types of clients I was working with. I told them about the restaurant chain that had seen a 40% increase in online orders after implementing my digital marketing strategy. I mentioned the e-commerce store I'd built for a small manufacturer that was now shipping products nationwide instead of just locally. "This is all online?" my mother asked. "People are paying you this much money for computer work?" "People are paying me this much money to help them grow their businesses. The fact that it happens through computers is just the delivery method, like how Dad uses blueprints and Emma uses project management software." My father nodded slowly, and I could see him trying to reconcile his mental image of my work with these results. "And this is sustainable? This isn't just a lucky streak? It's been growing consistently for over a year. I have clients booked through next spring, and I'm turning away new projects because I don't have the capacity." The conversation shifted after that. Instead of changing the subject or making dismissive comments, they started asking real questions. How did I find clients? What services were most in demand? How did I handle the business side of things? Taxes and contracts and professional relationships. For the first time in my adult life, my family was treating my work with respect and curiosity instead of skepticism and concern. It felt surreal, like I'd been speaking a foreign language for years and they'd suddenly learned to understand it. But the real revelation came later, when Emma and I were doing dishes together in the kitchen while our parents watched football in the living room. She was quiet for a long time, methodically scrubbing plates and handing them to me to dry. "I need to tell you something," she said finally, her voice lower than usual. "The company hasn't been doing as well lately." I paused with a dish towel in my hands. "What do you mean?" "We lost 2 major contracts this fall. The Morrison development fell through, and the city pulled the permit on the River Walk project. Dad's been scrambling to find replacement work, but everything's getting more competitive." This was news to me. Throughout dinner, my parents had talked about Emma's success at work, upcoming projects, her recent promotion. Nothing had suggested the family business was struggling. "How bad is it?" Emma glanced toward the living room, then lowered her voice even further. "Bad enough that Dad's talking about layoffs. We might have to let go of some of the crew we've worked with for years. Mom's talking about going back to work full-time to help with the bills." The plate in my hands suddenly felt fragile, like it might shatter from the weight of this information. Chen Construction had been the foundation of our family's identity and financial security for as long as I could remember. The idea that it might be failing while I was experiencing the best year of my professional life felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because what could you do about it? You work with small businesses, Maya. This is different. This is construction contracts, city permits, union negotiations. This is the real world. There it was again, that phrase that had followed me through years of family dinners and conversations. The real world, as if my world was somehow fictional or temporary or less significant. But as I stood in the kitchen where I'd grown up, holding a dish towel and processing the news that my family's business was crumbling while mine was thriving, I realized something important. The real world wasn't divided between online and offline, digital and physical, new and traditional. The real world was about solving problems, creating value, and adapting to change. And maybe, just maybe, the skills I'd developed in my supposedly fake online business might be exactly what Chen Construction needed to survive in an economy that was increasingly digital, even in industries that had never needed to think about websites or social media before. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Terrifying because it meant my family might actually need me in a way they'd never needed me before, exhilarating because it might finally give me the chance to prove that my work wasn't just valuable in abstract terms, but valuable to the people who mattered most to me. "Emma," I said, setting down the dish and turning to face her, "has Dad ever considered digital marketing for the company?" She looked at me like I'd suggested he start tap dancing. "Maya, construction companies don't need Instagram accounts." Maybe they do. Maybe that's exactly what they need. But even as I said it, I knew convincing my father to let me help would be the hardest sale I'd ever attempted. David Chen had built his business on handshakes and reputation, on showing up to job sites and delivering quality work. The idea that his daughter's computer skills could save his concrete empire would strike him as not just unlikely, but insulting. Still, as Emma and I finished the dishes in thoughtful silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The ground was shifting beneath all of us, and for the first time in my life, I might be the one standing on solid footing while my family scrambled to find their balance. The question was whether they'd be willing to reach for the hand I was offering, or if their pride would drag them down rather than accept help from the daughter they'd never quite learned to take seriously. The call came on a Wednesday morning in February, while I was reviewing analytics for a client's Valentine's Day campaign. My phone buzzed with my father's contact photo, something that hadn't happened since I'd moved out 8 months earlier. We texted occasionally, brief exchanges about family gatherings or my mother's birthday plans, but actual phone calls were reserved for emergencies. "Maya?" His voice sounded different, strained in a way I'd never heard before. "I need to talk to you about something important." I minimized my spreadsheet and gave him my full attention. "What's going on, Dad?" There was a long pause, the kind of silence that carries weight. "The company's in trouble. Real trouble. I didn't want to worry anyone, but it's gotten to the point where I can't handle it alone anymore." My stomach dropped. Even though Emma had hinted at problems during Thanksgiving, hearing it directly from my father made it feel suddenly, devastatingly real. David Chen admitting he couldn't handle something alone was like watching a mountain ask for help standing up. "How bad is it?" "We lost the Riverside Commons contract yesterday. That was supposed to carry us through the summer. Without it." He trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. Without it, there might not be a Chen construction by summer. "What happened? I thought that project was locked in." "The developer went with a firm from Columbus. Bigger company, lower bid, and they had something we didn't." He paused again, and I could hear him struggling with the words. "They had a comprehensive digital presence, website, social media, virtual project tours, online project management systems that clients could access in real time. The whole package." I felt something shift in my chest, like tumblers falling into place in a lock. "Dad, that's exactly what I do." "I know." The admission came out rough, like it physically hurt to say. "I've been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving, about what you said regarding digital marketing. I didn't understand it then, but I'm starting to see that maybe I've been missing something important." This was the moment I'd imagined countless times over the past few years, the vindication I'd dreamed of during every family dinner where my work was dismissed as playing around. But now that it was happening, all I felt was a deep sadness for how much pain could have been avoided if we'd had this conversation years earlier. "Tell me everything," I said, opening a new document on my computer. "Start from the beginning." Over the next hour, my father laid out the full scope of Chen Construction's problems. The construction industry in Northwest Ohio had become increasingly competitive, with larger firms from Cleveland and Columbus expanding into their territory. These companies weren't just competing on price and quality anymore. They were competing on technology, efficiency, and client experience. Modern developers expected real-time project updates, digital blueprints they could access from their phones, virtual reality walkthroughs of proposed buildings, and comprehensive online portfolios showing previous work. They wanted to research contractors online before making contact, to see reviews and testimonials, to understand a company's capabilities and track record before scheduling a single meeting. Chen Construction had none of that. Their website hadn't been updated since 2018 and looked like it had been designed a decade earlier. They had no social media presence, no online portfolio, no digital marketing strategy. When potential clients searched for construction companies in Toledo, Chen Construction appeared on page 3 of Google results, buried beneath competitors, who understood that modern business happened online first and in person second. The young developers especially, my father continued, they don't even return phone calls anymore. Everything's email, text messages, video conferences. They want to see everything digitally before they'll meet in person. We're losing contracts before we even get a chance to bid on them. As he talked, I found myself taking notes, my mind automatically shifting into consultation mode. This wasn't just about family anymore. This was about a business problem I knew how to solve. The same strategies I'd used to help Mrs. Rodriguez's bakery compete with chain stores could be scaled up to help Chen Construction compete with larger firms. Dad, I think I can help you with this. Another long pause. Maya, I appreciate the offer, but this is different from what you do. We're talking about million-dollar contracts, commercial developments, complex projects with multiple stakeholders. I'm talking about the same thing. The size of the contracts doesn't matter. The fundamental problem is the same. You have a great product that people can't find, and when they do find you, you're not presenting it in a way that builds confidence and trust. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, considering this. What would that look like? Hypothetically. Even now, even in crisis, he couldn't quite commit to the idea that his daughter's expertise might be exactly what he needed. But it was progress, and I'd learned to celebrate progress wherever I found it. Complete digital overhaul. New website with a portfolio showcasing your best projects, client testimonials, detailed information about your capabilities and certifications. Search engine optimization so you show up when people search for construction companies in Toledo. Social media presence that positions you as the established, reliable choice. Online project management tools that let clients track progress in real time. Virtual tours of completed projects. Professional photography and videography of your work. As I talked, I could feel my excitement building. This was exactly the kind of challenge I thrived on, taking a traditional business and helping it succeed in the digital age. I'd done it dozens of times with smaller companies, but never on this scale, never with stakes this high, and certainly never for my own family. How long would something like that take? If we started tomorrow, I could have a basic website live within 2 weeks and a comprehensive digital strategy implemented within 2 months. The key is starting with the fundamentals and building from there. And the cost. This was the delicate part. I could charge my standard rates, which for a project this size would run into 5 figures, or I could offer family rates, which might make my father more comfortable, but could also reinforce his perception that my work wasn't worth full price. Or I could do it for free, which would definitely make him see it as less valuable, and might create resentment if the project didn't work out perfectly. We can figure out payment later. Right now, the important thing is stopping the bleeding and getting you competitive again. Maya, I can't ask you to work for free. This is your business, your livelihood. It was the first time he'd referred to my work as a business without qualification or skepticism. 6 months ago, that acknowledgement would have meant everything to me. Now it felt like a step in the right direction, but not the destination. Let me put together a proposal, something comprehensive that shows exactly what I'm thinking and what it would cost if you hired an agency to do the same work. Then we can discuss terms. We talked for another 20 minutes, and I found myself taking on a role I'd never played before in my family dynamic. Instead of defending my expertise, I was consulting, asking strategic questions, offering solutions. My father was listening in a way he'd never listened before, taking notes, asking follow-up questions, treating my suggestions with the respect he'd give to any professional consultant. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at the notes I'd taken, trying to process what had just happened. The family business that had been held up as the example of real work for my entire life was now dependent on the skills they'd dismissed as computer games. The daughter who'd been written off as financially irresponsible was now in a position to potentially save the family's financial future. But the strangest part was how normal it felt. This wasn't revenge or vindication. It was just work. Complex, challenging work that required all the skills I'd developed over the past few years. But ultimately just another project. The emotional weight of it being my family's business was separate from the professional challenge of solving their digital marketing problems. I spent the rest of the week putting together the most comprehensive proposal I'd ever created. Detailed website mock-ups, social media strategy documents, SEO analysis, competitive research, project timelines, and cost breakdowns. I researched every major construction company in Ohio, analyzed their digital presence, identified opportunities and gaps in the market. What I found was both encouraging and sobering. Chen Construction was behind, but they weren't so far behind that they couldn't catch up quickly. More importantly, they had advantages that their digital-savvy competitors couldn't replicate. 25 years of local reputation, relationships with suppliers and subcontractors, and a track record of completed projects that spoke for themselves. The key was translating those offline advantages into online credibility. Instead of starting from scratch, we could build on the foundation of trust and quality my father had spent decades establishing. We just needed to make sure people could find that foundation when they went looking for it. I scheduled the presentation for the following Tuesday at the Chen Construction office, a converted warehouse on the south side of Toledo that had served as company headquarters for 15 years. Walking into that building felt like stepping into a time capsule. The same metal desks my father had bought used when I was in elementary school. The same filing cabinets stuffed with blueprints and contracts. The same coffee maker that had been ancient when Emma started working there. My father, mother, and Emma were all there, arranged around the conference table like a tribunal. The dynamic felt familiar and foreign at the same time. I'd sat at this table as a child, coloring, while my parents worked late. I'd sat here as a teenager, stuffing envelopes and answering phones during summer breaks. But I'd never sat here as an adult professional, presenting a business proposal to my own family. Before we start, my father said, I want to be clear about something. This meeting is happening because we need help, not because we're doing you a favor. If we move forward with this, it's because we believe you can deliver results, not because you're family. The statement was meant to be reassuring, I think, but it stung a little. Even now, even when they needed me, there was still an undertone of skepticism, a need to establish that this wasn't charity or nepotism. I understand, I said, setting up my laptop and connecting it to the projector Emma had borrowed from the main office. And I want to be clear about something too. This presentation represents the same quality of work I provide to all my clients. If we move forward, you'll be getting the same level of professionalism and results that companies pay premium rates for. The next hour was the strangest professional presentation of my career. I walked my family through every aspect of the digital strategy, from logo redesign to search engine optimization to social media content planning. I showed them examples of my work with other clients, analytics proving increased engagement, and revenue, testimonials from business owners who'd seen transformative results. My mother asked questions about timeline and implementation. Emma wanted to understand how social media could possibly help with B2B sales. My father focused on ROI, wanting to see concrete projections for how digital marketing would translate into actual contract wins. They were good questions, the same questions any smart business owner would ask. But hearing them from my family, seeing them engage with my work as seriously as they'd engage with any other professional presentation, felt surreal. This was the same family that had spent years treating my expertise as a hobby, now dissecting my proposal with the intensity they'd bring to reviewing bids from subcontractors. The website redesign alone, Emma said, studying the mock-ups I'd created. This looks more professional than half our competitors' sites. That's the point, I replied. People make decisions about who to trust within seconds of visiting a website. If your site looks outdated or unprofessional, potential clients assume your work is outdated and unprofessional too. My father nodded thoughtfully. And you think this social media component will actually generate leads? It seems like construction clients would be more traditional in their research methods. The decision makers are getting younger every year. Even traditional clients research online before making contact. And social media isn't just about generating leads directly, it's about building credibility and staying top of mind. When someone in Toledo needs a construction company 6 months from now, you want to be the first name they think of. We went through every section of the proposal methodically. By the end of the presentation, I could see the shift in their expressions. The skepticism was still there, but it was tempered by genuine interest and maybe even excitement about the possibilities. "What's your timeline?" my father asked. "If we decided to move forward, how quickly could you start?" "I could start tomorrow. The website redesign would take priority, since that's your most immediate need for responding to RFPs. I'd want to launch that within 2 weeks, then layer on the other components over the following month." "And cost?" I took a breath before answering. This was the moment that would determine whether this project happened or not. My standard rate for a project this scope would be $45,000. That includes everything in the proposal, plus 6 months of ongoing management and optimization. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my family exchange glances, and I could see them trying to reconcile the daughter they'd always known with the professional consultant, who'd just quoted them a fee higher than Emma's annual salary. "Maya," my mother said carefully, "that's a lot of money. It's a lot of work, and it's considerably less than what you'd pay a Columbus agency for the same services." I pulled quotes from 3 different firms, and they ranged from $60,000 to $80,000 for comparable packages. My father drummed his fingers on the table, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "What if it doesn't work? What if we spend that money and still can't compete with the bigger firms?" "Then you'll have spent less than what you lost on the Riverside Commons contract alone, and you'll have built digital assets that will benefit the company for years to come. But I'm confident it will work, because I've seen these strategies succeed dozens of times with other businesses." Emma leaned forward, her expression serious. "What would you need from us, besides the money?" "Access to project photos, client testimonials, company information, and someone to serve as point of contact for day-to-day implementation. I'd also need Dad to be willing to learn some basic digital tools and maybe even appear in some video content." The idea of my father appearing in social media videos almost made me smile. David Chen, who still printed emails to read them, creating content for Instagram and LinkedIn. But if this was going to work, it would require buy-in from everyone, especially the face of the company. "I need to think about this," my father said finally. "It's a big decision, and a lot of money." "I understand. But Dad, every day you wait is another day your competitors are getting further ahead. The digital gap isn't getting smaller on its own." They promised to discuss it over the weekend and get back to me by Monday. I packed up my laptop and presentation materials, said goodbye, and walked back to my car with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety churning in my stomach. This wasn't just about saving Chen Construction anymore. This was about proving, once and for all, that the work I'd been doing for years was not only legitimate, but essential. This was about showing my family that the daughter they'd written off as a dreamer was actually the one who could secure their future. But it was also about something deeper and more complicated. It was about forgiveness and respect, and the complex dynamics of family relationships that don't disappear just because business needs change. Success or failure on this project wouldn't just affect Chen Construction's bottom line, it would reshape our family dynamic forever. As I drove home through the familiar streets of Toledo, I realized I was scared in a way I'd never been scared about a client project before. Not scared of failure exactly, but scared of success. Because if this worked, if I could single-handedly save the family business that had been held up as the gold standard of real work my entire life, what would that mean for all the years they'd made me feel like my contributions didn't matter? The answer, I suspected, was that it would mean everything and nothing at the same time. Everything because it would finally, definitively prove my worth in terms they couldn't dismiss or minimize. Nothing because the people who truly matter don't make you prove your worth over and over again. But maybe that was okay. Maybe proving it to myself was enough. Maybe showing them was just a bonus. The phone call came at 7:30 Monday morning, just as I was settling in with my first cup of coffee and preparing to tackle a client presentation for a restaurant group in Michigan. My father's name flashed on the screen, and I knew immediately what his answer would be. There was something in the timing, the early hour that suggested urgency and decision rather than hesitation. "We want to move forward," he said without preamble. "All of us talked it over this weekend, and we're ready to hire you." The word hire hung in the air between us, loaded with significance I hadn't expected. Not work with or have you helpy? Askan but hire, professional, transactional, respectful. It was the same language he'd use with any contractor or consultant, and somehow that made it more meaningful than any family-based appeal could have been. "I'm glad to hear that, Dad. When can we get started?" "How about today?" Emma cleared her schedule this morning to go through project files with you, and I've got about 4 hours between site visits to answer any questions you have. The speed of it caught me off guard. I'd expected more deliberation, more gradual acceptance, maybe even some lingering reluctance. Instead, they seemed to have thrown themselves completely into the idea, with the same decisive energy my father brought to every construction project once he committed to it. "Perfect. I'll be there by 9. And Maya?" His voice softened, slightly. "Thank you. I know this probably isn't how you imagined working with the family business, but I'm grateful you're willing to take this on." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a few minutes, trying to process the magnitude of what was about to happen. For the first time in my professional life, success or failure would be measured not just in client satisfaction and financial results, but in family dynamics and personal validation. The stakes felt impossibly high and surprisingly manageable at the same time. I spent the morning at Chen Construction's office, diving deep into 25 years of project history. Emma had organized everything with her characteristic efficiency: photo archives, client testimonials, project specifications, awards and certifications, financial records showing the scope and scale of their work. As I sifted through decades of documentation, I began to understand something I'd never fully grasped before. Chen Construction wasn't just a successful local business, it was an integral part of Toledo's development and growth. They'd built the medical center where I'd had my wisdom teeth removed, the shopping complex where my family bought groceries, the apartment buildings where half my high school classmates now lived. The company my father had started with a used pickup truck had literally shaped the city I'd grown up in. "Look at this," Emma said, pulling out a framed newspaper clipping from 2019. "Dad won the Chamber of Commerce Excellence Award that year. The article talks about how Chen Construction has been a cornerstone of local development for over 2 decades. I studied the photo accompanying the article, my father shaking hands with the mayor at the awards ceremony. He looked proud, but also slightly uncomfortable with the attention. The same expression he'd worn at every school play and graduation ceremony throughout my childhood. Success had never made David Chen boastful, but it had made him quietly confident in his abilities and his company's reputation. "This is exactly what we need," I said, scanning the article. "Local recognition, community impact, established relationships." The challenge isn't convincing people that Chen Construction does good work. It's making sure they can find you when they're ready to hire someone. Over the next several hours, Emma and I cataloged every asset the company had that could be leveraged digitally: professional photos of completed projects, thank you letters from satisfied clients, industry certifications, safety awards, community involvement, employee testimonials. The material was all there, scattered across filing cabinets and storage boxes, waiting to be organized into a compelling digital narrative. My father stopped by around noon, fresh from a site inspection, still wearing his hard hat and safety vest. Seeing him in his work clothes while I sat surrounded by laptops and marketing materials created a visual representation of what we were trying to accomplish, bridging the gap between traditional construction work and modern business practices. "How's it looking?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my makeshift workstation. "Better than I expected. You've got incredible material to work with. It just needs to be presented in a way that modern clients can access and understand." I turned my laptop screen toward him, showing him the rough wireframe I'd sketched for the new website. "The homepage will feature a rotating gallery of your most impressive projects, with brief descriptions and client testimonials. Visitors can filter projects by type, size, or completion date." He leaned forward, studying the mock-up with the same intensity he'd bring to reviewing architectural plans. "And people actually look at websites before choosing a contractor?" "Dad, 93% of B2B buyers start their research online before making any contact with potential vendors. If you're not showing up in that initial research phase, you're not even in consideration for most projects." Emma pulled up a competitor's website on her phone and handed it to him. "Look at Morrison Construction's site. Virtual project tours, detailed case studies, client video testimonials. They're presenting the same type of work we do, but they're making it look more sophisticated and accessible." I watched my father scroll through the competitor's website, his expression growing more serious as he absorbed what he was seeing. This wasn't just about keeping up with trends anymore. This was about survival in an industry that was evolving faster than many traditional companies could adapt. "How long before we can have something like this live?" he asked. 2 weeks. For the basic site, another month for all the advanced features. But I want to start with search engine optimization immediately, because that takes time to show results." The afternoon flew by as we dove into the technical details of implementation. I explained how search engine optimization would help Chen Construction appear higher in Google results when people searched for Toledo contractors. I showed them how social media could be used to showcase ongoing projects and build relationships with potential clients. I outlined a content strategy that would position my father as a thought leader in the local construction industry. With each explanation, I could see them beginning to understand not just what digital marketing could do, but why it had become essential for businesses that wanted to compete in the modern economy. The skepticism that had defined their attitude toward my work for years was being replaced by genuine engagement and even excitement about the possibilities. "One thing I want to establish up front," I said as we wrapped up the planning session. "This is going to require ongoing involvement from both of you. I can create the digital infrastructure, but you'll need to provide regular content, respond to online inquiries, and maintain the social media presence. This isn't a set-it-and-forget-it solution." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I can handle the day-to-day posting and client communication. I've been wanting to take on more responsibility anyway, and I'll need you to be comfortable with some basic technology," I told my father. "Client relationship management software, online project tracking, maybe even appearing in some video content." The idea of my father creating social media videos still seemed surreal, but he didn't dismiss it outright. "Whatever it takes. I didn't build this company by being afraid of new challenges." That evening, I went home and started working on the project with an intensity I'd rarely brought to client work before. This wasn't just about delivering results, it was about proving that everything I'd built over the past few years had been leading to this moment. The daughter who'd been dismissed as a dreamer was about to save the family legacy, using the exact skills they'd never quite learned to respect. I worked until 3 in the morning, designing page layouts, writing copy, researching competitors, and planning the launch strategy. When I finally went to bed, my mind was still racing with ideas and possibilities. For the first time since moving out, I felt truly connected to my family's success, not as someone seeking approval, but as someone providing essential expertise. The website launch happened exactly 2 weeks later, on a Thursday morning in March. I'd spent the previous evening running final tests, checking every link, optimizing every image, making sure everything functioned perfectly across different devices and browsers. This launch felt more significant than any of the dozens of websites I'd built for other clients, because I knew my family would be watching and judging every detail. Emma was the first to see it live, gasping audibly when the homepage loaded on her computer screen. "Maya, this is incredible. It looks like something a Fortune 500 company would have." The site was clean, professional, and compelling. High-resolution photos of Chen Construction's most impressive projects dominated the homepage, with smooth transitions between images and clear calls to action. The project portfolio was organized intuitively, allowing visitors to browse by building, type, or project size. Client testimonials were prominently featured, with photos and company names lending credibility to the praise. But the feature I was most proud of was the project timeline section, where potential clients could see real-time updates from current construction sites, including photos, progress reports, and milestone completions. It was innovative for the industry and positioned Chen Construction as forward-thinking and transparent. My father's reaction was more subdued, but no less meaningful. He spent 20 minutes clicking through every page, reading every testimonial, studying every project photo. Finally, he looked up from the computer screen and met my eyes. "This makes us look like the company I always knew we were," he said, quietly. "Professional, established, trustworthy. I just never knew how to show people that before." Within 48 hours of the launch, the results started coming in. 3 new project inquiries through the website contact form, 2 phone calls from developers who'd found Chen Construction through Google searches, and a request for a bid on a commercial renovation project that could potentially run into 6 figures. But the real validation came the following week, when my father called me with news that would change everything. "Maya, you need to hear this. Johnson Development just called. They want to meet about the Harbor Point project." I knew enough about Toledo's development scene to recognize the significance. Harbor Point was a mixed-use development project worth over $3 million, the kind of contract that could anchor a construction company's revenue for an entire year. It was also the type of high-profile project that had been going to Columbus and Cleveland firms instead of local contractors. "How did they find you?" They said they were impressed by our website and online portfolio. The project manager specifically mentioned the virtual project tours and the real-time progress tracking. He said it made us look like a company that understands modern project management. I felt a surge of vindication so powerful it was almost overwhelming. The website features I'd spent weeks perfecting, the ones that had required convincing my family were worth the time and effort, had directly led to the biggest opportunity Chen Construction had received in years. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow afternoon. And Maya?" He paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. "I want you there. If they're impressed by the digital side of our operation, I want them to meet the person responsible for it." The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock at Johnson Development's downtown offices, in one of the newer high-rise buildings that had transformed Toledo's skyline over the past decade. I spent the morning preparing materials, printing project summaries, and coaching my father and Emma on how to present the company's digital capabilities as an integral part of their overall service offering. Walking into that conference room felt like stepping into a different world. The Johnson Development team was younger than I'd expected, led by a project manager named Marcus Williams, who couldn't have been more than 35. The other attendees included an architect, a financial analyst, and someone identified as the digital project coordinator. The presence of a digital project coordinator told me everything I needed to know about what this meeting would focus on. This wasn't just about construction capabilities. It was about technological integration, communication systems, and project management tools that could interface with their own digital infrastructure. My father handled the introductions with his characteristic professionalism, but I could see him adjusting his approach in real time as he read the room. Instead of focusing purely on construction experience and local relationships, he emphasized Chen Construction's commitment to innovation and modern project management practices. "We've recently completed a comprehensive digital transformation," he said, gesturing toward me. "My daughter Maya has implemented state-of-the-art project tracking and client communication systems that allow for unprecedented transparency and collaboration." It was the first time I'd ever heard my father describe my work in terms that positioned it as essential to the company's capabilities rather than supplementary to them. The shift in language was subtle but significant, representing a fundamental change in how he viewed the relationship between traditional construction work and digital business practices. Marcus Williams leaned forward with obvious interest. "That's exactly what we're looking for. The Harbor Point project involves multiple stakeholders, tight timelines, and significant coordination between different phases of development. We need a contractor who can provide real-time updates and integrate with our project management platform." "Maya can speak to those capabilities better than I can," my father said, and I realized he was essentially handing me control of the most important sales presentation in Chen Construction's history. I spent the next 30 minutes walking the Johnson development team through our digital project management system, demonstrating how clients could access real-time updates, view progress photos, track milestone completions, and communicate directly with project supervisors through an integrated platform. I showed them examples from recent projects, explained how the system had improved both efficiency and client satisfaction, and outlined how it could be customized for the specific needs of the Harbor Point development. The questions came fast and detailed, covering everything from data security to mobile accessibility to integration with third-party software systems. I answered each one confidently, drawing on years of experience helping businesses optimize their digital operations. But more than that, I was able to speak knowledgeably about how these digital tools translated into better construction outcomes. Because I'd spent the past month immersed in Chen Construction's actual project history and processes. "This is impressive," Marcus said finally. "Most of the contractors we've met with can talk about construction capabilities, but they can't articulate how those capabilities translate into better client experience through technology integration. That's because most construction companies treat technology as an afterthought," I replied. "We've built our digital systems around our construction processes, not the other way around. Technology should enhance and amplify your existing strengths, not replace them." The meeting lasted 2 hours, covering project timelines, budget considerations, subcontractor relationships, and permit processes. But underlying every conversation was the recognition that Chen Construction offered something unique in the local market: traditional construction expertise enhanced by cutting-edge digital capabilities. As we gathered our materials to leave, Marcus handed my father a business card. "We'll be making our decision within the week, but I want you to know that this meeting has been very encouraging. The combination of local experience and technological sophistication is exactly what we've been looking for." Walking back to the parking garage, none of us spoke until we were well out of earshot of the Johnson development offices. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Maya, that was incredible. I've never seen Dad present the company like that before." "Because I've never had material like this to present before," my father said. "Maya, what you've built for us in the past month. It's not just marketing or technology. It's transformed how we can position ourselves in the marketplace." 3 days later, the call came. Chen Construction had been selected for the Harbor Point project with a contract value of $2 million over 18 months. It was the largest single contract in the company's history, and according to Marcus Williams, their digital capabilities had been the deciding factor. That night, my family took me to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in Toledo, a place we'd only been to for milestone celebrations and special occasions. As we sat around the table, raising glasses in a toast to the Harbor Point contract, I realized that something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. I was no longer the family member whose contributions were tolerated or dismissed. I was the family member whose expertise had saved the company and secured its future. The daughter who'd been written off as a failure for choosing an unconventional career path had become the key to the family business's survival and growth. But perhaps more importantly, I'd proven to myself that the skills I'd developed weren't just valuable in abstract terms. They were essential in the modern economy. The online work my family had dismissed as playing on the computer had generated more revenue for Chen Construction in 1 month than they'd seen in the previous 6 months combined. As I looked around the table at my family, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and something approaching forgiveness. They'd needed to see concrete results before they could understand the value of what I'd been doing all along. That hurt, but it was also human nature. Sometimes people need proof before they can believe, and sometimes the best revenge is simply being undeniably successful. The Harbor Point project would launch the following month, with full digital documentation and real-time client access from day one. Chen Construction was no longer just a local contractor trying to compete with bigger firms. It was a technologically advanced company that could offer services other contractors couldn't match. And I was no longer just Maya Chen, the daughter, who'd chosen a different path. I was Maya Chen, the digital strategist who'd revolutionized the family business and secured its future in an increasingly competitive marketplace. The transformation was complete, for both the company and the family dynamics that had shaped my entire adult life. 6 months after the Harbor Point contract signing, I was sitting in what used to be the storage room at Chen Construction's office, now converted into my official workspace complete with dual monitors, professional lighting for video calls, and a whiteboard covered with digital marketing strategies for 3 different construction projects running simultaneously. The transformation had been swift and complete. What started as a rescue mission for a failing family business had evolved into something I'd never imagined. A true partnership where my expertise was not only valued, but considered essential to every major decision the company made. The numbers told the story better than any family dinner conversation ever could. Chen Construction's revenue had increased by 180% since the website launch. We'd landed 4 major contracts in addition to Harbor Point, including 2 that came directly through online inquiries from developers who'd found us through search engine optimization. The company that had been hemorrhaging money and considering layoffs was now hiring additional crew members and turning down projects because we were booked solid through the following year. But the real measure of success wasn't financial, it was relational. The daughter who'd once eaten dinner in silence while her accomplishments were dismissed now sat in weekly strategy meetings where her input shaped the company's future direction. The family member whose career had been described as playing on the computer was now introducing cutting-edge project management software that impressed clients and streamlined operations. The shift became most apparent during our monthly family dinners, which had evolved from tense affairs where I defended my life choices to collaborative planning sessions where we discussed business growth and expansion opportunities. Last month, when my father mentioned potentially opening a second location, his first question wasn't about construction capacity or local market conditions. It was whether our digital infrastructure could scale to support operations in multiple cities. Maya's built something here that goes beyond marketing, he'd said to my mother over dessert. She's created systems that make us more efficient, more professional, and more competitive than companies twice our size. Any expansion we do needs to be built around maintaining those advantages. The recognition felt surreal after years of having my work minimized and dismissed. But what felt even more significant was the organic way it had happened. There had been no dramatic apology, no tearful reconciliation scene where my family acknowledged years of misunderstanding my career. Instead, success had created its own narrative, one where results spoke louder than any conversation about respect or validation could have. Emma's evolution had been particularly striking to watch. The sister who'd once rolled her eyes at my computer games was now the company's director of digital operations, managing client communications through our online platform and creating social media content that showcased ongoing projects. She'd discovered a talent for visual storytelling that translated perfectly to Instagram and LinkedIn, where her behind-the-scenes construction posts were generating significant engagement and new business inquiries. "I never understood what you were doing before," she admitted during one of our weekly planning meetings. "I thought social media was just people posting pictures of their lunch. I didn't realize it was actually a business development tool that could generate real leads and build professional relationships." The learning curve had been steep for both Emma and my father, but their willingness to embrace new approaches had surprised me. David Chen, who'd spent decades building relationships through handshakes and face-to-face meetings, was now comfortable conducting client consultations over video calls and sharing project updates through digital platforms. The man who'd once printed emails to read them was creating content for LinkedIn and responding to online reviews. "The tools are different," he explained to a group of local business owners during a Chamber of Commerce presentation about digital transformation. "But the principles are the same. Construction has always been about communication, project management, and building trust with clients. Technology just gives us better ways to do those things." Watching my father present our digital marketing strategies to other business owners felt like witnessing an alternate reality where my expertise had always been valued and understood. He spoke about search engine optimization and social media engagement with the same confidence he'd always brought to discussions of concrete pours and building codes. The presentation had been Emma's idea, part of an effort to position Chen construction as thought leaders in the local business community. Maya's strategies could help other companies too, she'd suggested. Why not share some of the knowledge and build our reputation as innovators? The response had been overwhelming. Within a week of the chamber presentation, I'd received inquiries from 6 different local businesses wanting to discuss digital marketing consultations. A plumbing company, 2 restaurants, an accounting firm, a medical practice, and even a competing construction company that had heard about our success and wanted to understand how we'd transformed our market position so quickly. "You could build an entire secondary business around this," my mother suggested over dinner. "Help other family businesses modernize the way you helped us." The idea had merit, but it also felt premature. Chen Construction was still in the middle of its digital transformation, with new systems being implemented and processes being refined. The Harbor Point project was generating incredible results and opening doors to even larger opportunities, but it required constant attention to maintain the high standards we'd established. More importantly, I was discovering that working with family, despite all the complications and history, offered satisfactions that client work couldn't match. When Chen Construction succeeded, I wasn't just celebrating professional achievement. I was celebrating the security and prosperity of people I loved. When our digital strategies led to new contracts, I wasn't just earning consulting fees. I was contributing to the legacy my father had spent decades building. The complexity of mixing family relationships with professional collaboration wasn't always easy to navigate. There were moments when old dynamics surfaced, when my father's instinct to make unilateral decisions clashed with my need for creative control over digital strategies. There were times when Emma's enthusiasm for new ideas moved faster than our capacity to implement them effectively, but these challenges felt manageable in ways that the old family tensions never had. We were arguing about tactics and timelines now, not about whether my work had value or legitimacy. We were debating how to best leverage our digital advantages not whether those advantages existed at all. The ultimate validation came during a meeting with Johnson Development about a potential second project, even larger than Harbor Point. Marcus Williams had specifically requested that I attend the presentation, describing me as the strategic advantage that sets Chen Construction apart from other contractors. Your digital project management system exceeded our expectations, he told the room. The transparency, communication efficiency, and real-time tracking capabilities have made Harbor Point our smoothest construction project to date. We want that same level of technological integration for the Riverside Commons development. Riverside Commons was a $15 million mixed-use project that would span 3 years and establish Chen Construction as one of the premier commercial contractors in Northwest Ohio. It was the kind of opportunity my father had dreamed about when he started the company, the kind of contract that would secure the business for the next generation. We're prepared to structure this as a multi-phase partnership, Marcus continued, with Chen Construction serving as the primary contractor for all phases, contingent on maintaining the same digital project management standards you've established. After the meeting, as we walked back to our cars, my father was quiet for several blocks. Finally, he stopped on the sidewalk and turned to face me. Maya, I owe you an apology, not just for doubting your career choices, but for not understanding that what you were building was exactly what this company needed to survive and grow. The apology felt both necessary and insufficient. Necessary because years of dismissal and condescension had created wounds that success alone couldn't heal. Insufficient because words couldn't undo the isolation I'd felt during family gatherings, where my achievements were minimized or ignored. I appreciate that, Dad. But I think what matters more is where we go from here. Where we go from here is together, he said, as partners, as equals. And I want to make sure the business reflects that reality. The conversation that followed would reshape Chen Construction's organizational structure in ways I hadn't anticipated. My father proposed creating a formal partnership agreement that would give me equity in the company and decision-making authority over all digital strategy and business development initiatives. Emma would be promoted to Executive Vice President, with oversight of day-to-day operations and client relations. This isn't charity or family obligation, he clarified. This is recognition that the company's future depends on the expertise you've brought to it. You've earned an ownership stake through the value you've created. The offer was generous beyond anything I'd expected, but it also represented something more significant than financial compensation. It was acknowledgement that my contribution to Chen Construction wasn't temporary or auxiliary. It was foundational to the company's evolution and growth. Accepting the partnership meant committing to Toledo, to the family business, to a future I'd never imagined when I first started building websites for local bakeries. It meant putting aside dreams of expanding my own consulting practice to work exclusively on growing the company my father had built and I'd helped transform. But it also meant security, belonging, and the satisfaction of building something lasting. With people I loved, even if our journey to mutual respect had been longer and more complicated than any of us would have preferred. As I signed the partnership papers a month later, surrounded by my family in the conference room where I'd once presented my first proposal to save the failing business, I realized that success hadn't just changed Chen Construction's trajectory. It had created a new definition of family success, one that honored both traditional values and modern innovation, one that made room for different types of expertise and different paths to contribution. The girl who'd been dismissed as a failure for choosing an unconventional career had become the architect of her family's prosperity. The daughter who'd been told her work wasn't real had built something more substantial and lasting than anyone had imagined possible. And perhaps most importantly, I'd learned that vindication doesn't always come through proving others wrong. Sometimes it comes through helping them succeed in ways they never thought possible, through building bridges between old wisdom and new opportunities, through creating space for everyone to contribute their best talents to something bigger than any individual achievement. Chen Construction was no longer just my father's company, or Emma's workplace, or my rescue project. It was our shared legacy, built on concrete and steel but powered by pixels and algorithms, traditional in its values but modern in its methods, strong enough to weather whatever changes the future might bring. The transformation was complete, but the building had just begun. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.